Dearest cousin, we have arrived in system and expect to be planet-side in 3 days' time, barring unforeseen delays. The trip was as pleasant as being cooped up in a starship can be, and only mildly claustrophobic for Brelak. The only real excitement was when my human grandson was convinced to hide in some ductwork and hiss at the crew. He claimed his uncle told him that it's how you play alien. I was forced to apologize when the poor steward nearly sold himself. You can't imagine how much I look forward to being back in civilization. Regardless, our entire family is very much looking forward to an extended stay with you and Vedeem soon. Best regards, your beloved cousin, Phrysis.
Vedeem looked up from the missive at his father.
What does that mean?
Bherdin sniffed and shrugged for effect, but it was barely 9 in the morning, and the gesture lost most of its efficacy. Vedeem gave him a long look and waited as his father took a sip of his hot ubeki. His father studied the bottom of his cup intently before peering up under his brows. Vedeem counted to 12 before canting his head.
Father?
Bherdin drew himself up in his chair and straightened his robes before breathing a long-suffering sigh.
I'm quite sure I don't know what you're talking about. What do you mean? I'm already moving into your bedroom, father. Which uncle? What's all this about hissing and playing alien?
Vedeem stared at the message before looking back at his father. How many people are coming?
Son, you really should look at this as an adventure. Why, father, how many people? Well, honestly, I'm not entirely sure. The message is only a few hours old. If they're on a starliner, then that's 4 hours at light speed. I suppose I can send a reply to welcome her home and ask discreetly.
Bherdin reached out and patted Vedeem on the hand before taking back his omnipad.
We should get an answer before dinner, but I'm sure it won't be that bad. You worry too much. It will give you wrinkles. Just think, you finally got all that extra room cleared out of the pantry. Getting rid of the surcering and that frozen creamed durian isn't the problem. I thought those cans were bombs, the way Mr. Warwick was talking about them. Our stores are almost empty, though I suppose that won't matter if we don't have any customers.
Vedeem grumbled. He desperately wanted to flounce, but his father was better at it, so he pursed his lips as he played with his breakfast.
Those reviews were brutal. Our business has been down over half since the reviews came out. It's already picking back up. We've had a lot of inquiries. Sure, asking if we sell surcering as gag gifts. I thought you said never to let people take you lightly. A refined ethnic dish singly prepared only for very important guests at the request of the palace?
Bherdin waved the matter away with his mug of ubeki.
It's always best to cultivate a convivial ambience. Just never let people use the word gag when they're talking about your food.
Vedeem looked around the restaurant and tried not to let his anxiety show. The damage had started as soon as the reviews came out, but after 2 days it was getting worse. It was best to look at the quarterlies around lunch. The quarterlies were good to predict the hourlies. The hourlies were best for feeding into the dailies, broken out into lunch and dinner, of course. And the quarterlies, well, if the weeklies followed the quarterlies, then it was going to be bad. Diners were fickle and followed the crowd, and a bad review could ruin a business.
This was more like a whole tsunami of bad reviews.
There were still a few furtive guests who'd come through for a cheeseburger or an order of fried chicken, but there was no mistake. Business was the worst it had been since before Mr. Warwick helped his father to sort out the menu. Over the last couple of weeks, his father had even been talking about expanding to a second location on the far side of the city. But now?
If this keeps up, there won't be rent for the month.
True, they'd rebuilt a good-sized reserve in the restaurant's accounts, but how fast could that evaporate? What if the humans saw business was down? Everything depended on being able to get authentic produce shipped in. If the restaurant didn't make a good impression, then... It was all so complicated. All he'd wanted was to become a chef like his father, and apprenticing in the restaurant had been all he'd ever wanted. Just to make great food, a nice place. Alright, nothing as flashy as his father's. Maybe something in a solid black with silver highlights and lots of chrome. Who'd have thought that a few cheesecakes later he'd be dating a princess? It was bad enough that his family were barely in the nobility, and his father wasn't even the one with the claim to the title. As his son, he was barely more than a nobody.
What would our people say about me if the restaurant fails? I don't want people thinking I'm just some kind of low-ranking...
Vedeem shook himself and took a breath.
I'm not selling that course again. We'll work it out if she wants to.
But it would be easier if he was a success.
I'm still a Desari, the son of a noble house. Not important or rich, but it still counts.
But it would be easier if he was a success. If people thought he was more than just some poor boy with a nothing title who got lucky.
The restaurant has to succeed.
That was it, wasn't it? It was all a matter of perception. Surströmming wasn't something vomited up from the DeepMinder, it was a refined ethnic dish singly prepared only by royal request. And I'm not just some gold-digging joy boy. Vedeem reached down and plucked at his outfit. He dressed well at the restaurant, but otherwise. Black shirts and pants dominated most of his closet. He seldom wore makeup, and he couldn't remember the last time he'd been to a real salon. He only saw his mother once or twice a year since she split up with his father, and that suited him just fine. All the arguments and all the pain. She'd made his father feel so small for wanting a career, put him down over every setback, never any praise for his successes, and she'd done her best to keep him from finding success on his own. He looked down and examined his tunic, really feeling the fibre under his fingertips, feeling it as if it was the whole universe, and he'd never touched it before, the rough edges rolling under his fingertips.
My father came alive when they parted, but he's never married again, and I just hid myself away until she got bored.
It was a bitter epiphany, but it wasn't a new one. What was new was Melondi, Kalira, a woman in his life.
She doesn't care about what kind of noble I am, and she's never pushed.
Vedeem fingered his tunic again, but his thoughts were at home, running over his wardrobe.
It wouldn't kill me to wear a little makeup. Maybe dress up when I'm not working.
He had to work for the coming 3 weeks of Ifrovi. 3 weeks when he'd be the busy one, instead of her, and she said she wanted to spend every minute she could together, even sticking around the restaurant.
Something has to be done. I can't just live in her shadow, any more than I should have lived under my mother's.
Vedeem smoothed down the front of his tunic. It was immaculate as ever, but it felt like making a decision. Whatever happened over the next 3 weeks, he would be with Melondi, and at the end of it, she'd see the man she wanted as her husband. Or he'd see, if they could never work out. Tom Warwick sat down across the desk from Bherdin Desari in his office at Human Food. Outside, the kitchen was starting to bustle, opening itself for lunch, but something was off. The staff wasn't bustling around with their usual energy, and while that wouldn't have tipped him off, Bherdin was actually sitting in his office with his jacket off. Tom tried to think of when he'd ever seen Bherdin look like anything but an advertisement for men's formal wear, and realized he couldn't. Bherdin, you look a bit... There was no sense in telling him he looked less than perfect. Frazzled. What's going on? The little Shavanti seemed to deflate for a moment before lifting his chin.
Oh, goddess. Tom, I don't even know where to start, and you have so much on your plate at the hospital. How is Deshin?
She's recovering. I wanted to go spend the day with her, but Miv told me to make myself scarce for a while. Get out of the house and do something. Tom slouched down in the chair a bit. I guess I needed a push, though I'm not sure why.
You've been back and forth to the hospital all week, between your daughter and work at the academy. You look tired, and you don't even use makeup to hide it.
Bherdin sniffed.
It really wouldn't do you any harm, you know.
Yeah, well, I appreciate the thought. I guess Miv's been talking to Leia. They're heading over to see Desi and Solani, but they both told me to get lost without actually saying so.
And you listened?
Bherdin looked him over and shook his head slowly.
Tom, it never fails to amaze me how much you have to learn about women.
Tom arched an eyebrow and scowled, but when in Rome. Shilvanti women, maybe. Most days it feels like I'm starting a harem, but right now it feels like I'm being tossed out of the frat house.
I don't know what that means, but you need to take time for you. Women expect that, and you really do need some rest. As your friend, I swear, if I knew what colors would look natural on you, I'd insist on the makeup.
Well, how about we talk about you then? Tom made himself not grimace at the thought, but Din already thought he was so drab it was criminal, and there was nothing good down that road. So, how about you tell me what's been going on?
I don't know where to start. You've seen the reviews since last Shell?
Bherdin took in Tom's blank stare and rolled his eyes.
You really have got to start paying attention to the society pages.
Seriously? Tom couldn't help but chuckle. Why would I do that? Bherdin canted his head artfully to one side.
Your wedding?
Ah, well,
you're engaged again?
That's private. There's no way that's going to make the press.
You're engaged to an Imperial commando guarding a princess, and your wives have told you to make yourself scarce while they visit your fiancé.
Bherdin looked at him in despair and sighed heavily.
Tom, well, when you need me to be there, just call.
Bherdin, really,
Promise me, Bherdin sniffed. You'll thank me later.
Fine, I'll call.
I'm not hearing a lot of enthusiasm there.
Bherdin nodded smartly.
All things considered, it will just have to do.
For a moment, Tom saw his friend back in form. The moment passed, though. Alright, so what's the problem here? As long as you're telling me problems I didn't know I had, and what a joy that is, you might as well confess.
Honestly, the restaurant isn't doing well. Business has sunk like a stone since the reviews came out. I know my son is worried, and I've been trying to keep his spirits up. Efrovi is always good for business. You could serve the most pedestrian slop imaginable and make a profit.
Bherdin shuddered at the thought and pouted artfully before waving out toward the kitchen.
But with low on stock, the pantry is starting to positively run bare. My family is visiting, though, and there should be a resupply.
His voice trailed off. Well, visiting family is nice. Where are they coming in from? Tom asked brightly.
Earth.
Bherdin blinked.
Oh, I haven't seen you all week, and the message just washed up with the tide a couple of days ago.
Wait, Earth? I figured they'd be coming in from out of town, but Earth?
It's my cousin. Her whole family, including the McClellans.
If Bherdin had been issuing a memo at the notion of pedestrian food, his expression now was a manifesto.
Frances is a lovely woman, but she can be difficult. I don't know where I'm going to put them all either. I haven't had the heart to tell Vedeem. Do humans need special rooms?
Wait, you mean your cousin? The one who set you up with the imports?
And their family. Their human family.
Bherdin didn't whine, but it wasn't off by much.
I simply can't afford to look like things aren't doing well, and the thought of where to put them all.
Okay, so how many folks are you talking about?
I had a message back before I could even ask. There are 19 of them! 19! I can barely sleep 7 of them at my house, and poor Brellock is already anxious.
Bherdin clutched at his chest before peering across the desk, his voice a hushed whisper.
Francis asked which hotel I have them booked at. Tom, it's impossible to get rooms during the Throvery without any notice, and how could I ever afford a hotel?
Wait, they're coming in and she expects you to pay? Bherdin's look turned from distraught to withering, and Tom filed that away under forget I asked. Right, well, 7 at your place? So, 12 people? Why not have them stay at our house?
Your house? Tom, the academy is very nice, but...
No. I meant Mib's place out in town. Tom broke in, before Bherdin got properly wound up. Once that happened, it would take 10 minutes just to get things back on track. The house Leia lives in has a great view of the ocean and plenty of space. Besides, we were already thinking she could move in with us during the holiday. Desi's going to be chairbound for a while, and our place at the academy is set up a little better for that kind of thing. We were still deciding, but if you need the room, it shouldn't be a problem. Bherdin looked at him like a drowning man being thrown a life preserver. Tom, I couldn't possibly ask that of you. Seriously, it's... Alright, you talked me into it. Bherdin shot out of his chair like a rocket and donned his jacket, checking the lace on his cuffs before taking a deep breath. I'll make it up to you somehow, Tom. I promise. Don't worry about it. You let me pilfer the Serrano ham. I figure we're even as long as they take care of the place. Tom stretched. So, what about a new menu? I mean, if you're running low on things, there are ways to make what you have stretch. A new menu? Do you think that will help? Sure. My mother called it Depression-era cooking, and it's good for making supplies last. Things like potato pancakes, chowders, and chicken soup. You have plenty of stock items left in the pantry, so we can make carrot cake and sugar cream pie. Good hot food for when it's cold outside. It will be unbelievable, Bherdin exclaimed. Depression foods. A whole new menu guaranteed to lift the spirits and cure depression. Just in time for the joyous holiday. It's Depression-era food. That's not quite the same. Bherdin waved him away and struck a pose. I don't know about you, but I feel better already. A few hours later, Tom sat in Desi's room and was flipping through his emails when she appeared around the corner. The Rakiri orderly guiding her wheelchair was a nice woman with a name that utterly defeated his best attempts at pronunciation, and he gave it a miss rather than butchering again. He slipped his omnipad away and rose with a warm smile. How did she do?
Heels through burning silver will be very pleased. She did very well and all her muscles are responding, though motor control will require regular exercise for a while, but if we're lucky she should be done with the chair in 2 or 3 weeks. The woman leaned down and gave Desi an admonishing look. That's as long as she keeps up her training and takes proper breaks. The implant will adapt to clear input faster. I promise, Blissful Livery. Desi craned her head up with difficulty. It's just that... This one is an overachiever, Mr. Warwick. The woman was a sight to behold. Her merled pelt reminded Tom of an Australian shepherd, but her smile was warm and she'd been invariably kind. He watched as Desi's chair lifted and bent into a platform before the Rakiri helped to slide her back into bed. Just remind her to take frequent breaks. Rushing this will only slow her recovery down. I promise we'll watch over her. We have nothing on our schedule except a quiet Ifrovi. Tom smiled. We'll make sure she's here for her therapy appointments. My wives and I appreciate the help, Blissful Livery. Hey, that was closer. You just need to roll it a bit more, she grinned. Sounds like you've been practicing. A bit. Tom felt his cheeks colouring. I'm sorry, I can't seem to roll my tongue around it. I spent all my time trying to master Vatico and I still have an accent. I just haven't run into your language very much. No? The Rakiri woman cocked her head in a very Shovanti gesture. Earth has become a very popular destination with my people. One of my cousins went hunting in a province called Nistriagan and got lucky. Oh, she probably meant Michigan. It's become a real hotspot for Rakiri, along with Montana and all the way up into Canada. Tom nodded as memories flooded back, and he started digging out Desi's dinner. I live south of Michigan, so I mostly saw Shovanti. What was she hunting? Deer or elk? A boyfriend. She met a nice guy who moved there from dirt 3 years ago and set up a trophy mounting shop. They met at a bar and started talking entrails, and next thing you knew, they were engaged. She always has been a smooth talker, she replied wistfully before sniffing the air. Oh, hey, what is that smell? Oh, chicken soup. Tom grinned as steam curled up from what seemed to be a Shovanti crockpot. Want to try a cup? It's good for what ails you, and I made more than enough. This has healing properties? Blissful Livery padded over and looked at it curiously. Well, if you're a human, it's just a game bird in broth with noodles and a few vegetables. Lots of antioxidants and vitamins. Tom shrugged, spooning it out and offering over a steaming mug. I don't know what it would do for a Shovanti or a Rakiri, but it certainly makes a nice hot meal when it's cold outside. Blissful Livery sniffed at it once before taking a sip. Oh, this is delicious. It tastes almost like mezzaguirware. I haven't had any fresh saguirware in years.
Specialty of the house. If you like it, just head out to a place called Human Food. Tom watched the Rakiri drain the mug enthusiastically and gave her a second cup as she asked for details. Halfway across the galaxy, and some things still taste like chicken.
You don't have to feed me, Father,
Desi grimaced, though it was more for the look of the thing. She hated feeling helpless, but she'd never had a father to fuss over her. It was kind of nice. Yes, well, the orderlies are taking good care of you, but I still wanted to come and visit. I was on my own all the time on Earth, then always had people near once I got to Shil. I haven't even thought of a vacation in years. Tom shrugged and set the bowl aside. Anyway, this way I get to use you for my own selfish ends as the first test of Bherdin's new menu.
Second, I think Wistful Levery was over the moons with it.
True. I really wish I could pronounce her name. Tom turned away, and she watched him rummaging through the food pack he brought.
Well, you do all right.
I think she was humouring me, but I appreciate it.
Mm-hmm. You do have an accent when it comes to your V's and your W's.
She shrugged. It took some effort, but it felt so good to be able to do it. What?
Just like that. It's not bad, honestly, but it's there, she said with an impish grin. Liam has one too, and Belder thinks it's sexy.
You're sure? I mean, I don't want people struggling with my classes. Her father was frowning and she stifled a laugh. When he worried and actually let it show, it was probably the most manly thing she ever saw in him. Well, except for his cooking, and the soup was good.
It's fine. Trust me, you should have met the Grand Duchess at the banquet. She had an accent as dense as osmium and no one said a thing.
I suppose. Tom gave her a lingering look before turning back to his bag. I just feel bally about it, but I suppose you're right. It's not like Jama doesn't have an accent, though, and he's been on the faculty since the goddess invented dirt. Something tugged at her memory, but she had to laugh.
Since the goddess made dirt? I've never heard that one before.
A phrase. I'm adapting. Tom settled back in his chair after clearing things away, and looked satisfied. So, the soup is a winner? But didn't look like he was going to vibrate across the floor when we finished making it, but his larder is getting pretty low. He's going to start advertising the spectacular holiday menu, but I called Monsignor Barcio to see if he can get some of the mission to come out for dinner. Maybe if there are more authentic humans eating there.
I'm sure it will be okay, she said firmly, licking her lips. The soup is yummy.
Yummy. But hey, yummy is good. See? I'm not the only one with an accent.
You should have heard Desala saying, I am Frau Blucher. I thought the twins were going to die.
Desi smiled as Tom snorted, happy to have cheered him up.
So everyone else has gone home?
It seems so, he nodded. Shinshiki is around the Dawns, but I guess she has some business with her family. I guess Pejrin don't really do holidays, so I'll spend some time getting to know her when she reappears. Melondi is staying in the dorm with Kazlan and Kamara, but I'm going to suggest she spend some time out at Human Food, helping out.
She'll do it. I mean, I think he had her at Cheesecake, but she really cares about Vedeem,
Desi said wistfully, as Worry gnawed at her.
Father, can I ask you a question?
Always. He canted his head at her, and she nearly blushed. Sometimes it was easy to see the human there, and sometimes he'd come so far in the mum since she first met him.
It's personal.
She felt the blush on her cheeks, but she was committed now. It wasn't like she could ask anyone else.
I'm going to have this data port in the back of my neck for the rest of my life. Do you think a guy will ever notice me? I mean, notice me?
Desi watched as her father rubbed his forehead a moment, the suspense dragging out inside. It was difficult to move, but she felt like she was squirming inside. Honestly, I can give you my answer as your father, or I can give you my answer as the guy teaching marriage fundamentals. But don't ask me too much about the second part. It's still making my head swim.
Just a straight answer, please. I can't ask Liam, and I don't have any other friends who are men.
She gulped.
It wouldn't feel right asking Vedeem when he's seen Mel. I mean, that kind of thing could be poaching, you know? You just don't approach another woman's guy without her invitation.
Poaching? Well, I had to think about that. I guess I'm still coming to terms with just how rare men are. I mean, I'm surrounded by women, but I see Bherdin and Jama pretty often. I guess I've been lucky to find any men that I can be social with, though both of them are a trip. He paused, shaking his head at her look of incomprehension. What I mean is, they're very different, but I'm thankful to have them. Anyway, the straight answer? Please. I'm going to be teaching you girls how to handle relationships, and it really hasn't crossed my mind just how hard it is to find one in the first place. Tom pursed his lips in the way he did when he was wrestling with an answer. That said, you're a smart girl. You're pretty, you've got good prospects. My advice is that no boy who's worth anything is going to care about a data port that's hidden under your hair. You just be yourself, and I think things will happen when you aren't expecting it. You really think so? Absolutely. Besides, if I don't like who you bring home, I've got a big sword. Oh, goddess, you wouldn't. Yep. Kill me an admiral with this here blade. Tom preened as he drew his arms wide. Went down like a felled Turox, too. Now, you're going to be nice to my daughter, ain't ya? If you did that to a date, I would die, she huffed. Besides, you're going to teach us to use swords, right? I'll be able to take care of myself. I am, yes. Though you're going to have to be careful with that augment in your spine. Tom folded his hands. It may make control a lot easier, but there are a lot of things about it I don't understand. I know, but it's for the best. I don't want to feel this helpless ever again. Desi stared down at her body. It was starting to respond, but it was still mostly limp, and she hated it. Since I had to have an implant, I might as well get some advantages out of it. You just focus on you. In the meantime, I guess I have to convince Leia to move in with us over the holiday. That won't be a problem, Desi grinned. She's been looking forward to time with you and Miv, you know. Yeah, she's made that clear. I can't believe they're both spending time with Solani already. It's perfectly normal, she said, matter-of-factly. Just get used to it, father. I suppose, Tom shrugged. It could be worse. Worse? She tried canting her head into the pillow. It moved slowly, but the effect was there. I had your mother all alone in the cabin for weeks before I got to Shil. Father! Desi could feel herself turning as blue as a sunny day. You did not just talk about my mother like that. Yeah, well, it was a long trip to Shil, and it was just us. I wonder how Liam's going to manage with two. It was a cold and windy evening, and Monsignor Santino Barcillo regarded the man beside him with an amiable smile that gave away nothing. While most of the human contingent seemed happy with the facility, and were busy sorting through countless packing containers and settling into their quarters, there were some notable difficulties. Rabbi Zasman Levin was one of them. The man wasn't just irascible. He was almost impossible to please. God moved in mysterious ways, and the ineffable was not for man to know, but it still seemed Levin was a penance. How the man had been joined to the mission to Shil was incomprehensible. Nothing about the mission building had been right. The area set up for the synagogue was suspect, to say nothing of the offices, the cafeteria, or his rooms. Lady Wakama had been very helpful over the last few days, but even that was a trial. In the dark recesses of his thoughts, he began to wonder if Levin had been sent to embrace the Creator in all the wondrous aspects one could behold, or if its peers had wanted to put some distance between themselves and the man's acerbic nature. Regardless, he was committed. They were here on Shil, and there was nothing to be done but to try and win the man over. Thankfully, Tom Warwick's phone call had come at a fortuitous time. Getting the rabbi out and letting him see something of Shil might just be the thing. A meal, breaking bread with a fellow colleague. And to see if he dislikes other races, or just is a cross for everyone to bear. The sooner he knew that, the better. If the mission was to reach out to the other face here on Shil, it would be best to know if Levin posed a problem. Going out into town and mixing with the local population seemed like an ideal solution, though while Levin observed the vast metropolis as it sped past their window, he said little, keeping his own counsel. So much for this brave new world that has such wondrous peoples in it.
I hope you will find the restaurant favorable, Rabbi. It's a Shovanti establishment, but it imports produce from Earth. A human friend has helped them learn to prepare it.
Levin grunted, and Barsio said a prayer in his thoughts as penance for his impatience with the man.
Shovanti cuisine offers a wide variety of seafood, and Lady Wakama has made some excellent recommendations. Perhaps one should determine what will be kosher?
The miles sped by in silence.
They cook what they have available, of course. I've eaten there 3 times now and enjoyed it very much, though the chef there has been known to make some interesting interpretations. I hope you'll be understanding if some dishes are a bit suspect.
After a while, he turned to the rabbi and asked,
It's still a requirement of your faith that you not eat pork?
The rabbi nodded tersely. Yes, that is one of our laws. A mile sped past, and Sentio felt his patience growing thin. Still, it was better to ask an indelicate question, lest there be a scene.
Have you ever eaten pork?
Yes. On one occasion I did accidentally eat bacon in a sandwich.
The Monsignor nodded in understanding as their cab turned into the parking lot. As the cab rolled to a stop, the rabbi spoke up and asked,
Father, is it still a requirement of your church that you remain celibate?
Yes, the priest replied. That is still very much a part of my faith.
The rabbi regarded him stoically as the cab pulled off the thoroughfare.
And have you ever fallen to the temptations of a woman?
On one occasion, he said carefully. It was before I pledged my faith to the church.
Well, the rabbi nodded understandingly as their cab rolled to a stop.
It certainly beats the hell out of a bacon sandwich.
Santio Barsio prayed for calm as they climbed out of the autocab and made their way across the windswept lot to the door. Santino Barsio was a man of faith, and the Creator's works were not meant for the mind of man to know, although it still gave him some pleasure when Levin turned from the door and ran face first into the bust of a tall Rakiri woman just inside. Levin's mouth stopped opening and closing after a moment, and Barsio nodded politely. The Rakiri woman bristled, and, if not for the fur, Santino could swear she was blushing.
Haro, human! Rishchin Hofian Agiyama Chikan Zoop?
The Lord was truly ineffable. Liam Claassen looked at Belder and Priss and began to sweat. It wasn't just that Belle was everything he'd never known he wanted, and now he couldn't imagine wanting anything else. It wasn't just that Priss was gorgeous, full-faced with short, lustrous raven hair that curled just over her shoulders. Together, the two of them were every guy's dream date. At least, that had been in the back of his mind. What guy wouldn't think about having a fun time out, visiting a whole new planet with his girl and her friend along? Alright, he didn't really know Priscilla, but she and Belle were really tight. It would be a fun time. Okay, the starship was small. It was only a 4-day trip, and fine, they had to share a cabin. That wasn't a big deal, but there were no separate rooms? At that point, Liam started feeling a bit cornered. Belle was fantastic. He wanted to spend his life with her, and meeting her family was an important first step. He'd done all the right things to make a good impression. His clothes were the best he could bring. Nothing tight, nothing revealing. He'd packed and planned everything around how to make a perfect impression, and sharing a room with Priss just hadn't been what he expected. But that still wasn't the problem. Look, what I'm saying is no big deal. Belder was wearing little more than a nightshirt, and had just finished flossing her tusks. I mean, you think she's cute, don't you? Belder wore the hopeful expression of someone who wanted nothing but the best things in the world for him, and his mind started to boggle. Priss was no more than a few feet away, right there in the bath cubicle, and while she was wearing more than Builder, it wasn't by much. Mostly Pris was blushing furiously into the mirror, trying to pretend she couldn't hear a word. Not that Builder seemed to notice. His mouth opened and closed, trying to make words come out, but his brain didn't want to engage. Builder patted his hand sympathetically. I know the cabin isn't what you expected, but please don't be upset. We promised not to look, and it will only be a couple of days. Belle, I just want to make a good impression on your family. It shouldn't have come out as a question, but he didn't know what else to say. After all his preparations and coaching by Hope, they were just so casual. I am not a prude. I am not a prude. Guys his age grew up learning about Shilvanti women. He could barely remember when there weren't Shilvanti on Earth, and you grew up knowing what you needed to do. You never looked too interested. You never took off your shirt or showed anything revealing. You never, ever got yourself alone with a Marine. Not that it was a big problem in Canada. Most of the Imperial personnel above the 49th parallel were all Rakiri, and while they were all just as interested, they tended to be a lot more discreet than the Shil. It was mostly curiosity. Mostly. They tended to think of forming families in packs, whereas Belder... And don't worry about my family, she grinned happily. It's just normal out in Willist, okay? I mean, a healthy guy your age would be thinking about 7 or 8 women. If you came with me alone, they'd think you were weird. Wait, what? 8? Oh, yeah, trust me. I live on a big ranch, but it's still a pretty small planet. I mean, people hear all those stories about humans being monogamous, and you don't want my family to think you're selfish. Selfish? No, I'm cool. Really. I know, so don't worry. I mean, it's silly, but you'll be great. Why don't you and Pris just make yourselves comfortable, and I'll see what the dispenser has for dinner, okay? Liam looked at Pris, who smiled back at him winsomely, and turned a deeper shade of blue. Belder was already off and bent over at the kitchenette in the corner. Belder, who blushed at the drop of a hat. Belder, who turned bright cobalt if he flirted too much. Belder, who got squeamish about everything from her figure to her height. Liam Clarson looked around the tiny cabin that he'd be sharing with 2 incredibly hot college girls, and glanced back at the woman he wanted to be sharing it with. Really living with a woman for the first time in his life. He peered into the abyss of the big casualness, and the abyss looked back.